Ahoy, ahoy, and welcome back to the new and improved Return to Old Town. I'm Extra Fancy Potato Chips, and today we are going to be starting our journey through the history of America's domestic architecture by going back to the 1600s to a style sometimes referred to as First Period. Named such despite neither being the first period of homes in North America nor the first period of homes built by Europeans in North America. That's right, today we're getting witchy Salem style as we explore America's post-medieval style. So buckle up your hats and let's get into this. So back in the 17th century, the east coast of what would eventually become the United States was divided into two English colonies separated by a Dutch colony along the Hudson River. So we'll get to the Dutch in a future episode. Today we're just going to be focusing on these English colonies. If you're watching this from a computer, keep your eyes out for the card at the top, where I'll link you to other YouTube channels and creators that go deeper into the history being made around the time periods we explore in this series. Now, as I said earlier, Europeans obviously weren't the first to be building homes here. Indigenous peoples were constructing sophisticated homes long before the Europeans came to the continent. Take, for example, the longhouse, which, as the name implies, could stretch as long as 80 feet. So most of the time, these homes would have gable front roofs, but sometimes they would have rounded roofs instead. The layout being a long hallway with booths on either side, each with their own hearth and storage. So as for the homes the Europeans were building, they typically just mimicked the styles found back in Europe, albeit with materials and resources that they could find locally, i.e. a whole lot of wood. Now, one such European carryover that might jump out to you are these houses' sharply pitched roofs. You see, initially these homes had to have steep roofs because they were originally thatched. The steepness is important because it's crucial for thatched roofs to be able to drain water properly, something they're actually quite effective at doing. Unfortunately, they are not very effective at protecting against ice and cold in the winter, and as such, these roofs would be replaced by, you guessed it, more wood. These early settlers used wood incredibly liberally. When they first settled North America, there were massive virgin forests sprawling across the continent. So while homes back in the United Kingdom would protect their exteriors with a limestone via a lime wash, giving it that iconic white color, homes in North America would protect themselves against the elements with wood siding and shingles. Now, as you recall me saying earlier, the English colonies were divided by a Dutch colony in the middle, and as such, you get a few different stylistic traditions between the North and the South. So whereas wood was more dominant as an exterior in the northern English colonies, in the South, brick would increasingly become more popular as an exterior. Houses in the South were also more commonly single floor compared to those in the North. And with that second floor in the northern colonies, they would often overhang the floors below. The same could be said with the gables below the roof. Also take note of the decorative wooden pendants underneath the overhang. Now, another big difference between the northern and southern homes were the location of the fireplace. Northern English colonies would put them in the center of the home as to better conserve heat in the winter, while southern colonies would put fireplaces on the side of their homes to better release heat while cooking during the hot summer months. Now, one exception to this rule was in the northern colony of Rhode Island, where due to an abundance of limestone was able to make big stone chimneys on either side of their homes. These were called stone enders. But one thing that does connect both the North and South were that these chimneys were massive, and they also usually had very decorative tops. Another detail of these post-medieval homes are their tiny casement windows with diamond-shaped panes. These were made small to conserve heat, but also because glass was difficult to come by in North America at the time. In the following centuries, these tiny windows would be replaced by larger square-paned double-hung windows, as was the later style. Though more recently, a lot of these would be reverted back to the tiny casement windows through restorations. So next we have the doors, which would have been batten doors. So that means it's made up of several vertical planks held together by a horizontal or diagonal beam called a batten. Despite how common these doors are, we don't really have any in The Sims 2, surprisingly enough. So I imagine our door that we put onto this place would have been something that got replaced at some point. And speaking of The Sims, let's get into our build. So if you haven't already guessed it, we're building Black Point Cottage. Now, looking at the house in The Sims 1, despite being sold as an old style of home, one thing that's jumping out to me is that it doesn't have any sort of heat source within it. Obviously in The Sims 1, you know, it's always beautiful weather all the time, so you wouldn't necessarily need a heat source, but we're gonna wanna put something in because we wanna add that sort of realism to these home styles. We can also see that this home's walls are either a stucco or this lime wash thing with half timbering. Now, stucco is more commonly associated with Southwestern styles, as well as later revivals like Mediterranean, Mission, or Tudor. Now, we'll get to the revivals down the road, but as of now, that sort of finish on a home would be relatively uncommon during the post-medieval period. I do, however, like the half timbering, and these homes do have a lot of exposed wood to them, so I think it would be appropriate to incorporate a little bit of that into our final design. I also really like the door on this house, but the windows are totally wrong. Looking at this door on the side, which doesn't have a door, it's just open, I'm thinking that these windows might also be open. So that's something that we are going to have to change in bringing it more into a post-medieval style. Now, all that said, I do have a pretty dang good idea of how I'm going to be building this house. So I'll leave you guys to enjoy the rest of the speed build, and I'll catch you at the end for the tour. And if you stick around to the very end, we'll do the before and after. See you there! And welcome back! So my thinking for this house is that it was initially built as this sort of central home in the middle here, and that these brick sections on the side and the front were later additions. This house went through a few iterations. I was always confident it would be more of a northern tradition, but I wasn't sure, at least at first, whether I would do something more like a stone ender or something more like what we see in Salem. However, looking at the selection of fireplaces, I think it would make more sense to do something like a centralized chimney, since stone enders tend to have very massive fireplaces to them. So the fireplace that I actually chose typically has a big stone chimney on it, but I decided to use this little trick in the game that enables you to swap out the chimney on a fireplace. So that way I can use the stone fireplace but still have a brick chimney. So to do this trick, it's quite simple. All you have to do is place a fireplace with a brick chimney on an adjacent floor to where you want to have the fireplace. Then you just place the stone fireplace. Then you just delete the original fireplace with the brick chimney, and you'll be left with a brick chimney on your stone fireplace. And this also works for the stucco chimney as well. Initially, I also wanted to place a fireplace in the attic, but I guess the game didn't want me to do that, so there we go, no fireplace up there. What's really strange though is, as I was trying to do this, the game just randomly deleted an entire chimney stack and all the fireplaces. Yeah, that's just some of the fun glitches we enjoy in this 20-year-old game. Also at the same time, all of the windows got deleted on the second and above floors. Well, at least they just went into hiding. Mayhaps to evoke a spirit of the original home? I don't know. Maybe it's just that my game is possessed. Either way, if this happens to you, all you have to do is save the game and the windows will reappear. Now, another trick I decided to implement into this house is to build my own sort of half timbering by combining the move objects cheat with the set quarter tile placement cheat. And that enables me to place wooden beams within the walls themselves. This also gives your walls a bit more texture as opposed to just the flat wallpaper that you put on them. So yeah, the layout of the house I expanded to include that central fireplace. I also expanded the second floor a bit to overhang the first floor on the one side. As I said, this was pretty common with homes in the northern English colonies. So the house in the Sims 1 is unfurnished. I decided to add a few furnishings, including this lovely little outhouse in the back for you. And this house can be yours for just 39,000 simoleons. So there we are. There's our first home of the neighborhood. So thank you all for watching. I'm excited to get back in the groove of making these. I just reached 100 subscribers, which means a lot, especially considering I haven't been uploading for the past 3 months. So I just appreciate all the love that you guys are giving. So you can download all of these homes to play for yourself by supporting me on Patreon. By supporting me on Patreon, you become an extra special potato chip, and this seriously helps me to make more videos, so I very much appreciate it. Not only can you download homes from the past series, but you can also download homes that haven't been featured yet, including this French eclectic home, which I think is just really charming. I know, I really ought to have kids with these dad jokes. Anyway, if you like the music in this series, I just released my debut album in its entirety to my music channel, so you can go over there and listen to it and find out for yourself what this weirdo sounds like when he's singing. So yeah, all those links down in the description. Before I leave you with the before and after, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next week as we explore how the Europeans learned how to overcome those winter cools with a new style of home on the Cape of Cod. So I'll see you next week. Have a good one.